Please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
It's been the biggest missed opportunity. You believe that the government should have exercised the political majority it enjoys to be able to drive through banking reforms, which in your mind means privatization.
Yeah, because, I think there's been a lot of debate about privatization and whether that's the thing to do or not to do, and all sorts of ideological debates have come about. For me, it's a very simple number which tells you about really what's going on out here, which is that in India, like as you know now, about 2/3 of the assets are with the public sector banks. This is the highest of any democratic country in the world. The average across emerging markets is about 1/3 in terms of what it is. So every country needs a public sector to meet some social objectives. But there is no country like India where the figure is this lopsided. So I think that, for me, that's the issue. It's not about public versus private. It's about a balance. That in the banking system, the average number in which the share is there across the world is about 1/3, and India's at 2/3. And there's a side effect to this, which is that if you look at all the incremental economic the financial activity, it's all happening through the private sector banking in terms of whether it's got to do with trade finance, credit cards, the massive retail lending that we are seeing. A bulk of it is happening through the private sector banks anyway. So what India is seeing is really privatization by malign neglect. That it's not happening explicitly, but the banking system is being privatized, but it's happening at a huge cost. Whereas the public sector banks are not only being destroyed in value, but it's also choking the economic recovery. And for me, the single biggest fear just now in India, if you ask me, what is the biggest risk to India in 2018? I think the single biggest risk to India, if you ask me currently, is the fact that we have a regulatory overkill. That we have seen we have seen this.
Are we likely to see a regulatory overkill, or we are already seeing a regulatory overkill?
I think we're already seeing parts of it.
Okay.
And this is, already manifesting itself in many ways. Now, I do believe that many public sector banks are going to be completely frozen to lend, given the sort of regulatory overkill that we are seeing currently, which is that...
So you believe that there is going to be a credit freeze?
Not a credit freeze, because the private sector banks have taken such an increased share, and I think that they will keep lending. But there are many sort of side effects of this. The first side effect is that the access to credit is going to get more and more directed towards the big companies with established credits, right? So a problem in India in the last few years, and this is a global problem, but it's been sort of accentuated in India, is that the big have gotten bigger. So if you look at companies in each sector, the top companies have just kept gaining market share at the cost of the smaller companies. And when you have this type of a credit environment, it's the small and medium-sized businesses which get hurt the most when you have, like the sort of risk aversion which sets through. And a lot of the private sector banks will be able to lend, but a lot of the public sector banks are going to be really frozen. And even the private sector banks are going to be much more cautious about who we are lending to, what the credits are, because the cost now of making a bad loan has gone up a lot. It's almost become like a criminal offense. And I think that this is what India has to be careful about, which is that we have to avoid this temptation for regulatory overkill. And this has already been playing itself out in many ways.
Okay.
One is the banking sector. The other statistic which I find, which is what we just came up with, which I find quite staggering, is that since 2014, 23,000 millionaires have left this country.
23,000 millionaires have left India since 2014?
Yes.
Okay.
And in terms of, like you notice, in terms of what's going on here, and to put this in a global perspective, last year, 7,000 millionaires left this country, the largest number in recent times. The year before that, it was 4,000. So the number is going up of the number of millionaires leaving this country. In absolute terms, this is still behind China, but as a share of total millionaires leaving this country, this is the largest of any major nation in the world. So that so we're seeing
How
this.
do you explain that?
Well, of course, some will say this is a good thing, that this is an anti-corruption drive and we're driving all the corrupt away. But I think that there's a major side effect of this, which is that at the end of the day, you need your own domestic people to invest in your country. I think that is very important. Foreign investment is important, but it's really domestic sort of participation, domestic investors who sort of make a nation going forward. So I think that, to me, this has to be really sort of looked into, that why are so many millionaires leaving this country? And if you're happy about it because you think this is part of the anti-corruption drive, fair enough. But when the number is the highest in the world, at least as a share of total millionaires leaving the country, that should be a cause for concern.